Today is about using your equity to diversify your asset portfolio, aka using it to buy investment properties. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, a critical part of doing that is how do you finance it? And we have Sherri Arnold, who's our favorite lender. She's so crafty and creative, and she's just a fabulous human being. And she's here to razzle dazzle us with different home equity programs that you can employ and use with the pursuit of investment. So she's up next. Sherri?
Heather and Michelle wanted me to go over some of the things that you can do to access the money other than pulling the money out of your own asset account, because that's not going to benefit you as much. So, first one, HELOCs, right? Everybody knows them. Home equity line of credit. It's pretty easy. They're not expensive, particularly in most cases. You can generally get them for nothing. Literally no fees, up to about $250,000. You can get about $1 million if you stack them appropriately, and that literally means having a loan first and then a HELOC behind it so that you can access that much equity. Most home equity lines of credit do max out at about $500,000, but you can ask for exceptions on that. If you have a really solid whole portfolio that a lender wants to see, a fantastic credit score of 780 or more, really, really great equity, really stellar credit, I mean just all these little layers that they like to see. And they're going to be willing to give you a little bit more on that. And by more, I mean between $750,000 to $1 million. So $1 million is the rarity, but it is out there. But we all know the Fed, they raised interest rates, right? So people say, oh my God, my rates are going up. It's really that prime rate, which follows the Fed Fund Index, that went up. So those of us that have a HELOC, it's prime plus something, typically, right? In some cases, it's not prime plus, it's prime minus. Now what's interesting, when rates start to go up, your margin on your HELOCs go down. So if you have one now, look at it. See what the margin is and see if you can get it reduced. So my favorite one is up to $250,000. It doesn't cost you a dime to get it. They pay for everything. They pay for the appraisal. And the margin is 0.5% below prime. So whatever happens with prime, it's going to be a half point under. They don't really care specifically about the HELOC. What they care about is, oh, it's a 0.5% under prime. And by the way, if you open a checking account, or if you open a savings, or a CD, that's really where they're making their money. It's super flexible, right? You can borrow against it, you can pay it off, you can pay it down, you can borrow it again. You generally have a 10-year draw period where you can do that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then the remaining 20 years are there for you just to pay it back. That doesn't mean that you don't get to get another HELOC. Almost every HELOC lender will say, oh, guess what, your draw period's over. Do you want to renew it? And if the margin's lower at that time, great. But you don't have to wait for that. You can do it because it's basically free. Do it whenever the margins come down. As opposed to a HE loan, home equity loan, it's fixed rate. It is a higher rate than a HELOC. There's nothing adjustable about it. When you get the HE loan, they're going to give you all of the money up front. There is no draw period. You just get it, you put it in your bank, and you sit on it until you're ready to use the money, which also means you're making payments on it right away. As opposed to a HELOC, you're only going to pay for it when you use it, other than generally an annual fee between about $75 to $100. It's not much. So on the HE loan, it can be a nice option for people who are just very, very risk adverse. If you're worried about what's happening with interest rates, you can get that. You can put it in the bank and you can use it as you see fit. Just know that that interest rate, it's going to be higher than a HELOC.
What is it like? What do you think it is now
For a HE loan? A HE loan would be somewhere between 6 to 8%, depending on the term. So the term of that could be as low as 5 years to as long as 30 years.
And what about a HELOC?
A HELOC is going to be a 10-year draw period followed by a 20-year repayment period. Unless there are some of them, like if you're getting a HELOC on an investment property, the rate's going to be higher, it's going to have a 5-year draw period and then followed by a 10-year repayment period. So a total of 15 years on those. They also generally are not free. They generally have you pay for your own appraisal and your own due diligence on that one because it's a little bit riskier product for them because it's on an investment property.
What is the average rate of the HELOC versus the HELOC? Because you
So-
said 8 to 8.
Right, so for a HELOC, it could be as low as 0.5% under prime,
Which would
but
be-
so 3.5%, but, because prime 4,
Okay,
so
thank
3.5% there, but in California, there are these nifty little overlays because California is traditionally a more risky state, so lenders have what's called LLPAs or loan level price adjustments. Those are baked into your rate. You don't see it, you just say, oh wow, that rate's higher than I thought it would be. That's because there's some kind of a risk profile. And on a HELOC, that might be just that you live in California. So that favorite HELOC that I was telling you about, that's out of Chicago. They'll give it to us here, but it's out of Chicago. Okay, little caveat on both of those that I put on the slide that you probably can't see, caveat. So, I'm not a CPA, and I don't play one on TV, but if I was, I would say that check with your CPA first because they're going to tell you that if you borrow your equity on your home, whether it's a HELoan or a HELOC, that the mortgage interest that you pay on that is going to be tax deductible if you use it for improvements on the home that you borrowed against. So just keep that in mind. So that kind of brings me to cash out refis. You would almost always think that a cash out refi, especially in this environment, is never going to be a HELOC, and that's not the case. If you own your home free and clear right now, and you were to get a cash out refi at a higher rate, it's not 2, it's not 1.75, it's 5. It's 4.75. It's somewhere in that higher range, which is still historically ridiculously low, but let's say you did that. That interest is tax deductible. So if you own your home free and clear, and you're not doing anything else with that equity, and you borrow it on a cash out refi at a higher rate, and you use that then to use as a down payment on an investment property, that whole investment property is now going to go on your Schedule E of your tax returns if you don't have an LLC or an LP or an S Corp that you're putting it in later, not at closing. So let's say you do that, you take in a cash out refi at a higher rate, you use that money as a down payment. Now you've got 2 loans. You've got the loan that you borrowed against your primary that you're getting a tax deduction on. You're also getting a tax deduction on everything on that rental property. Because let's say it's on your 1040, you've got your Schedule E, you've never had that before. That Schedule E is like its own little Schedule C, but made just for your property. So now you've got your deduction of your mortgage interest, your taxes, your depreciation, your homeowners association dues, your maintenance, repairs, all of that is going to operate like its own little criteria over here, right? So we all know that when the taxes changed in 2018, we had the SALT tax, your state and local taxes, and those of us that live in California got capped at $10,000, right? So our interest, our tax, and things like that, that all of a sudden we kind of got shut down on a little bit. Now we've got something else. So having it that way, real helpful.
She was saying talk to your mortgage strategist, and I want to talk because there are a lot of entrepreneurs in our area. So Realtor, self-employed, many others self-employed, so you can take advantage of that in many tax ways. But when you're knowing that you're going to have an upcoming HELOC or an upcoming something you have to qualify for, she truly is a tax strategist. So she will, well, I've worked with her. Okay, this year you're going to take a hit more on taxes, but you're going to have much more, blah, blah, blah. And that's going to help you qualify for X more. So if you're even thinking about it in the next couple of years, if it's not Sherri, talk to someone because they really can help you plan your tax return. And so for me, it's okay, accountant, what's the tax return? Then I give it to Sherri, and she's like, can we put this here? And so just keep in mind that it's the upfront planning really helps a lot. Okay.
So a DSCR loan is debt service coverage ratio And the reason that this matters is because let's say you are a physician that has 18 S corporations and multiple partnerships, and you have a really busy schedule, or you are anybody else in this room who has a really busy schedule. You've got great credit, you've got your down payment, you're just ready to go, and then your lender says, I need all of your tax returns for the last 2 years. I need your P&Ls for your year-to-date income that you've made so far for not one, but every single business. I need every mortgage statement, and the list goes on, right? You've been down the road, it's a lot. And it really matters because depending on the loan that you're qualifying for, you can't just choose not to include one of your income sources on any jumbo loan. So if that's the case, is there a loan that you can do where you don't have to mess with any of that, but you know it's going to be a little bit higher rate? And that is a DSCR loan. It is functionally like a commercial loan. And what you're doing is you're looking at how much rent am I going to receive on this property, and we know that based on the appraisal. We have a rent schedule in there that tells us what the estimated rents are. And if the mortgage payment, the PITIA, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and association dues, if that total is equal to that rent schedule, and you have a good credit score, and you've got your down payment, you qualify. We're not going to take into account your 18 different S corps. We're not going to look at any of your other debts. We don't care. All we're looking for is, does that income on that property service that debt? Just like commercial. So you can do that on 1 to 4 residences. It's very handy. You do have a higher interest rate. It's one of those, you kind of get what you pay for, and you are getting convenience. So it's generally about a point higher than average. So right now, if you're looking at a conventional conforming rate at 5.5, it could be 6.5. It could be 7. In that case, the rate is less important than what the whole end goal is. And the whole end goal is to build your wealth, which is a combination of the strategy of your taxes combined with the appreciation of the property. So as long as those two work, and as long as you know that whenever that house isn't rented, you can still manage that payment for a month or two while you repair it, fix it, do whatever, you're good.
So, just to clarify, this program is not using your equity, right? Just want to clarify, so for people who are like, okay, I want to invest, I don't have the income, I have too many debts, I have blah, 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 whatever the reason is, this program is designed for those investors.
It's fantastic for people who are self-employed, who also have a business that just does not show well on taxes. I mean, that's kind of the reason that some of us are self-employed. Not everything that you do is going to pass over to the IRS. Sorry, not sorry. So if that's the case,
So is it kind of like a bank statement?
kind of, it's not really the same because we don't want your bank statements and we don't care, except for the fact that we need to document your money. All of that stuff still matters as far as where did your money come from and did it come from a source that we can use. They almost all have prepayment penalties. Every single one of these DSCR loans has a prepayment penalty. Typically, people aren't turning over their investment properties quite so quick. So that begs the question, what is the prepayment penalty? If you did have to sell it, what would it be? It would be equal to 6 months interest payments. Okay? So that's what you would pay. You can buy out the prepayment penalty. They're generally 3 years. You can buy it down to 2, you can buy it down to 1, or you can buy it down to 0. But if you do that, you're not buying it out in cash, you're buying it out in an increase in your interest rate. So these are some of the other not typical qualifying styles. Not typical mean pay stubs, W-2s, tax returns. So the first one is no ratio. So no ratio loans used to be called stated income loans. They went away for a good reason. Because they started being used back in the day for things that they were not intended to be used for. And that had a lot to do with the government saying, hey, if these people don't qualify, you need to make a loan that they can't qualify for. Okay, well that's not hard. Well, a no ratio loan is essentially that. So you've got no income and you've got no employment. So why would the lender make the loan? They would make that loan, again, if you have excellent credit. Really, really good credit is key on these. So, and they can verify enough assets to ensure that you've got your down payment and you've got payment reserves. Those payment reserves are reserves for your primary residence, this property, and any other property that you have. It's a convenience factor. It's not something for your primary residence typically, but you can use that for an investment property. Asset depletion, this can go from all across the board. Asset depletion can be something that we use for somebody on a conforming conventional loan to a jumbo loan. Typically in those cases, those people are retired, and if they're retired and they've got a boatload of money, but they've got no significant income, we'll take the total amount of the asset. Let's say that they've got $5 million in the bank, but they don't have any significant income, and we look at how much is it going to cost them to put a down payment, and then how much reserves are we going to need? Maybe it's 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, depending on the loan amount. And then we take that remaining dollar amount that they have, and we amortize that over a period of time, which is typically between 240 to 360 months. That calculation is then their income. 1 year borrower or CPA prepared P&L statement. And you know, if you go to your CPA and you say, hey, I need you to prepare a P&L, really? Especially right now. But they will do it, and it will cost you. Your loan is potentially going to be a slightly higher interest rate if you're preparing the profit and loss statement yourself, and that's all you're giving them. Because that is quite literally as good as the piece of paper it is written on. However, they are going to look again at payment reserves on your primary residence and every other property that you have. If your CPA prepares that, that's going to be a lower interest rate because the CPA is putting their name on it, that they've reviewed your books, they know you, and that profit and loss for year to date or the last 12 months in year to date is completely solid, and then we take that total amount of the net plus any depreciation earned, and we turn that into an amortized amount over your income. So pretty easy in that sense, unless you have to pay your CPA. 12 or 24 months bank statements. 12 or 24 month bank statement loans can be a slightly better interest rate than a P&L. And it's pretty easy to see why. We're going to look at every single deposit that you have on your bank statement. We have software to do it. We quite literally scan it in. We pull through all of those, and then we look at the deposits that are, oh, my friend gave me $1,000 for tacos, versus, okay, this is legitimate income coming in for the business. Once we have those business deposits and we can identify, hey, the majority of these are business deposits, then we look at what type of business it is, and then we assign an expense factor to that business. Does your business have a lot of inventory, or is it service-based? If it's service-based, we're going to apply a much smaller percentage of an expense ratio to it. We're going to kind of pull that down, right? Because you're not paying for a lot. You're service-based. If you have a very heavy inventory-laden business, then we're going to apply a larger expense factor. So how do we decide? We literally decide on which one looks better. So we'll generally ask you for all 24 months, because if 24 months is going to serve the purpose better, we're going to give you the benefit of 24. If it's like, oh, well, let's just get rid of those 12. Let's look at now. If that 12 is better, that's what we're going to use. So that's why we might say, hey, we might just do 12 and give us 24. That's why, because we're going to give you whatever the benefit is, and that loan is going to have interest rates that, again, are commensurate with or around no ratio loans, basically DSCR loans, anything that's out of the box, which we also call non-QM. So if any lender says to you, oh yeah, that's a non-QM loan, which stands for qualified mortgage, which makes it sound like I don't have a qualified mortgage. That's just, qualified mortgage is a government term, it means nothing, ignore it. It really is the difference between Fannie, Freddie, and everything else. So, it's fine.